to the Plastic Underground. Approaching the station, please stand away from the platform edge. Alright, so here is the pattern that I drew up of this plasma rifle from the original Doom. I found some reference images online of what this rifle looked like, and then I found some people who had kind of reimagined it into like a 3D and not a 32-bit style. So that's kind of what I based it on. A couple of the features that stand out in the original design are the handle, the ammo thing, and then the top rack. So, and the copper coils obviously are pretty iconic. So, those are the things that I liked about this rendered model that I found. So I just kind of drew up this template to the size that I thought it should be, and I'm just using some floor mat foam here like usual. So I get these all cut out of floor mat foam. I'm cutting out the basic shape of these first, not cutting them out like the full shape yet. It's not easier to cut out this after it's all glued together because it's harder to cut through the foam straight when it's thick. But if you cut all these pieces out and follow your Sharpie line and then try to glue them together, it's not going to be even. You're gonna have wonky cuts, and then you're still gonna sand it anyway. So I always try to glue everything together pretty good. So testing out there, I just took apart a Bluetooth speaker, and I had that all put on the bench, and then I just used this piece of PVC pipe to see if it blasts the sound out of it, and it does. So now I go back to my foam cutouts here, and I can cut this section of foam out so that the pipe will fit in the middle of the gun. This basically becomes like the barrel of this rifle. But it also acts as a place for the sound to channel from the speaker out to the front. I thought that would be a fun little thing to have a Bluetooth speaker in it, so you could play Doom music or even sound effects for the gun, and have it kind of like blast out of the barrel. So if you did like picture ops and that kind of stuff at a con, you kind of like point it at the person that you're taking pictures of, and it blasts the music at them. And I just thought that would be a pretty fun little gimmicky thing to add in. So just using some contact cement, I put it on both sides of the foam, and then you stick the foam together, and it's pretty permanent. It's a pretty permanent bond. So now that's all glued together, I can go back through and I can cut out the rest of this gun, the shape, cut all these extra parts off. I'm going with a little thinner blade so I can get into this curves kind of stuff. I just kind of go slow, take my time, kind of remove each layer as I cut it. There's the paper template for the ammo part. So just cutting these squares out, and I bevel these so that it gets that like octagon shape. The part I just cut out will be the corners. So it's beveled on one side, flat on the other, and it'll make up all of these 4 corners. So that's one full side glued up, and then I add this little chunk to be the very bottom. And that gets glued into place. And that creates the full box there. And obviously you have to add front and back sides to it. But so I don't have to do any math or anything. I put that together first, and then I trace that shape onto some paper, so I don't have to figure out the corners. I can just kind of trace exactly how the corners should look. And it's foam, so you can kind of smush and pinch it in places that you need to too. So it's one of the joys of working with foam, is that you can kind of force it into shape if you have to. So yeah, I just glue that on the front and back pieces on there to make that a complete box. Now I can shove the barrel inside. Because now you can see it lines up to that open section inside the ammo pack. And my plan from the beginning was always to put the Bluetooth and the battery and stuff inside the ammo pack. So I just kind of carve in a little spot for the speaker to go inside the gun and line up with that barrel. And then all that stuff can fit inside of this. And then I realize here that I have to trim the ammo pack a little bit so that it fits around that speaker. So I do that. I don't know if I show it, but I do end up like resoldering all these parts together, and I even solder in the charge port to the side of the ammo pack so I can recharge that battery. Alright, so this is the front of the gun. This is like the barrel part. It's like kind of like a heat coil thing on the front. So I'm just using some 5mm foam here. Give it a this all cut out. Actually, no. What am I talking about? This is the this is the part that goes on the back of the gun. Yeah. Sorry, it's been a little bit since I built this. So this is the part that goes on the back of the gun. This is just some detail parts. It is still 5mm foam, but I made it so that it would wrap around the top of the gun. I line up both sides to where they are supposed to be. And then I take the top part and smush it down flat and wrap this corner around. You can see I smushed that top piece flat. The handle part's going to go on that later. So just make sure that that is flat for there. And then the base of the gun has these 45 bevels on the top part, so I'm just cutting these with a blade first, and then I can kind of sand them a little smoother later. So this is the part on the top of the gun that gets wrapped around. This is some 2mm foam. Using a sharp piece of copper pipe to twist and cut out all these circles. I cut out the circles first, and then I use my blade to cut the straight lines, and this helps me get that that look. I've done this before on other projects. This is a pattern that you find on a lot of Star Trek, Star Wars stuff. There's a lot of like the Death Star corridor. This is what it looks like. So I've done this on a few other projects. It always works to cut the circles out first and then cut the straight line. And then I'm just gluing this to this middle part here. So I don't know what this is supposed to be. I don't know if this is supposed to be like a heat sink, but just a little bit of detail. So these are some side detail parts here. This is again floor mat foam. Marking these to where they need to be, and these get beveled, all the edges get beveled. So again, I cut these with my X-Acto blade first, just to get rid of the material. Then I can sand it with my Dremel later, just to smooth out the cut lines and stuff. Is a detail part that goes on the back of the gun. This is just a circle I'm cutting out of some 5mm foam. And that goes right there. And then those detail parts that we cut out, they go on this side here. They go on both sides of the gun. This is the handle part that goes on the front. So this is just some floor mat foam cut out as a square. I'm just wrapping that to make sure that that fits around the gun. This is the trigger part, and the parts above it are the parts that make up the handle rack part on the top of the gun, where like the scope clips into. Actually, that's not the trigger. Looks just like that shape, but that's not the trigger. So sorry about that. Again, this is the handle part that goes on the top of the gun. It's got the rack on top where your like scopes and flashlights and stuff would clip in on a real gun. So I just cut out some different shapes out of some different thicknesses of foam, and kind of built this all as separate parts. In the past, when I've made these, I have cut these out of one thick piece of foam. But I really think that the way I did it this time worked out really good. Kind of build it like Legos. You just keep clipping these pieces together, and it worked out pretty good. So this is some 5mm foam. I just cut out this strip of 5mm foam, and these little chunks here are a little bit longer than the width of that, and they get glued on top. This is what makes up that rack part that I was talking about. So I glue these all the way down on top of here. I start at the front and the back, and then I just kind of space these out. I kind of eyeball it to get the spacing right on here. When I get all those done, then I glue the whole piece onto the top of that other part that we just made. Then that whole thing gets glued on the top of the gun. Just using some super glue for this kind of stuff. I like using super glue for stuff that I can just tack into place quick. I don't have to wait for it to dry. And stuff that's not going to have a lot of like pressure on that. I use contact cement for a lot of the parts when I want it to stick together like really, really well. It's going to be under like tension or pressure specifically. And then super glue I use just to tack parts into place that aren't going to be under any pressure or anything. Then I go through and I cut out this section here where the trigger goes. So I went around and I cut that first, and then taking these pliers just to kind of lift up each section of that foam. It kind of helps me take it apart a little bit better, so I don't have to cut all the way through. And then I just stick the trigger in there, make sure it fits. So these are going to be the copper coils on the front. These are some floor mat foam. I'm cutting these out into some 1/2-inch strips. I think they're 1/2 inch. So I cut all these out, and then what I do is I sand all the corners round, and then the edges too, I also round those out on the front. And yeah, this did take quite a bit of time. It was kind of monotonous. You can buy foam dowels that are already round. Just cut them, put them in place. I was under a little bit of a time crunch, so I did not do that. But they worked pretty well. You can see here how I glued those into place. They're pretty good. They look pretty cool when they're all glued together. So this part is the front of the gun that I thought I was cutting out before, but this is the very front barrel. Again, this is just some 5mm foam, and cutting out all these squares and stuff. This ended up working pretty good. I realized though, like after I was working on it, I thought this would just glue together and hold its shape. Then I realized that with all these cuts out of it, it's hard to maintain that like rectangular shape that it has. But it worked. It worked pretty good. I didn't want this to be a solid piece. I wanted it to look like it was like the cage, the thin cage that it's supposed to be. So I ended up being pretty happy with this part here. I think what I did do is I glued in a piece in the back that glued onto the front of the barrel, so it had a bigger connection point, and not just the thin 5mm foam. Yeah, so this part here, I glued onto the front barrel. I made sure that I cut a hole out for that pipe so that the sound still comes out. And all this does is it gives me a place to glue that cage onto. So that's how I fastened this part here. So it's a little bit better of a connection than just gluing a thin piece of foam to the edge. Plus it also gives it a little bit of depth. Sets it out apart of the barrel. The thing I do is for the grip part here in the front, I give it a sanding on the top, just give it a 45-degree bevel. And then I carve in where your like finger grips and stuff go. So I just carve those in with a sanding drum. And then I go through and I forgot that I had to sand the handle part. Give that a good bezel so that your hand can fit around it a little bit better. And then the front part of that handle has a little bit of a recess, so I just sand that into the handle. Using a little bit of quick seal. This is some flexible plumbing bathroom caulk. I just kind of put this in all the seams and gaps and stuff just to kind of give it a quick like filler. It helps it look a little bit better. So I put this in the edges of the foam where you can see the seams and some of the gaps and stuff from where I cut stuff a little bit too far or too deep. So I use my finger and I put that into some gaps, and then I will dip my finger into a little bit of water and then run it over again, and it just helps smooth it out. And this works pretty good. I do this, I've done this on a lot of projects and stuff, so. So doing a final test of the sound, make sure that the speaker still works. And it does work pretty good. So I had to wire in a switch for the Bluetooth speaker. So that gets glued here on the front. There's a detail piece on the front and back of this part that kind of looks like a rivet. So that's where I decided to put the switch. And then I glued a piece of foam to the switch, so it's kind of hidden. And you just push that little piece of foam in, and it turns on the speaker. Then I also wired in a connection part so that the whole ammo pack can come off. It can get like unclipped from the speaker. And then I wire in the charging port to make it a little bit longer. So then I can charge it from the outside of the ammo pack. So I coated everything with Plasti Dip, and I give it a spray paint of this gray that I had laying around. And that looks pretty good. So then I go through with some copper, and I paint all these copper pipes up. The painting is pretty basic. Yeah, so then I go through... I think I lost some footage. I think I went back through with some darker gray on top of that gray paint and just made it a little bit darker. I added some black to the top rack and the handle, and I painted the grip kind of like a tannish color. And then I'm just going around with some silver on a sponge and just painting some chips and wears and that kind of fun stuff. The other thing I do is I paint these squares white first, because I'm going to paint them with red, so the red stands out better on the white. So that's how I did that. That worked out pretty good. And then that's it. That's how I made the plasma rifle from Doom, the original Doom. So yeah, we went to a local con here, had some fun, and I think the other video I have coming out is the actual Doom helmet. I made the whole costume, but I was in such a crunch to get this built before I actually went away on a vacation. So I literally came home and went right to this con, so it was kind of crazy. But I built the helmet, and I'll show you how I made the helmet. And yeah, there you go. So I'll see you guys next week when we do some more Doom.
Hey there, gang. Will from the Daystrom holodeck. I'm back in the old plastic underground. Can you believe it? Well, I'm going to show you the final product of the plasma rifle. Let's go over and check it out. So here it is. It may beep because it's currently searching for my Bluetooth, but because I'm recording, it's not finding it. But that's okay. Check it out. Smooth. So Caleb and I talked about putting maybe lights here, maybe making this a light up thing in the future. And we also talked about putting a light at the end here, but like a purplish light to give that final kind of plasma effect. But the really cool thing is, which I'm sure Caleb highlighted in his discussion, is that this is the Bluetooth speaker, and that's where all the goodness is. Goes down in there. This is the charging point. This is the connecting. The wiring goes down to there. And then down on this end is where the speaker comes out of. And it does pretty good. One of the best things was I had somebody tell me, like, from a distance, they could tell that this was the plasma rifle, and that also this top part was very impressive. They really enjoyed this part. So I think it's great. It was easy to carry around. Yeah, so that was the plasma rifle. Worked out great. Super impressed with it. Always hard to make a 2D stationary pixelated down at the bottom of the screen type of weapon look three-dimensional and realistic in the real world. Caleb did a great job. Everybody that saw it immediately knew what it was. There was no like, huh? What's that supposed to be? Everybody knew what it was. So, another fine piece of craftsmanship from the Plastic Underground. So back to Caleb in the new underground.